With John Wick Chapter 4 just around the corner, fans and viewers of the popular action film franchise are already binge-watching its first 3 movies. But, someone needs to say it. As much as I don't want to address this elephant in the room, all of them are practically the same. I mean, aside from all the action, all he does is fight and run. But yeah, it wasn't like this in the beginning. During the first movie, we saw Keanu Reeves' John Wick living peacefully, silently mourning the loss of his wife, with their beloved dog as his lone companion. But of course, they can't leave the man alone. They just had to mess with him, which led to the revival of the Baba Yaga. As threatening as that is, his return came with the cost. I mean, he was not supposed to make a comeback after he vowed to stay away from the industry. But of course, he needs to have his revenge first. He'll deal with the repercussions later. And now we're about to hit the 4th movie. He's still facing the said repercussions. Which brings us to my point from before. All the John Wick movies are practically the same, but it's not all bad. I mean, there won't be a 4th movie, nor several spin-offs in the works if the public didn't buy into it, right? All of this was made possible only because the creators decided to kill his dog. Lo and behold, the birth of a franchise. So props to Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, but starting this franchise wasn't easy, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch had difficulty when working on John Wick, their first project as first unit directors after spending 15 years working in stunts, action, and second unit work. So what they had in mind was to create an action film about former assassin John Wick, who leaves retirement to seek vengeance and re-enters the world of murderers that lurk in the shadows of New York City. So the general theme they managed to nail down to a T. But to elaborate on his story and to get to his target, the son of John Wick's previous gangster boss, Wick must shoot his way past a lot of faceless goons and a few more familiar individuals in this society with its own etiquette, style, and traditions. That too, we pretty much saw in all 3 movies, and most definitely in Chapter 4. Still, this sounds like a typical assassin movie, no? Naturally, Stahelski and Leitch set out to create a film that wasn't your usual example of its genre. Did you know? One said that Keanu Reeves' lead role was rarely talked about at all. 2, there were very few close-ups and none of the unsettling handheld camera work that has come to characterize contemporary action cinema. And instead, their movie was full of elaborately orchestrated, almost balletic long takes. 3, there was the question of John Wick's reason for his cold-blooded retaliation against his adversaries, which led to the creation of what they were now learning to be a very grim film. They were unaware that John Wick would go on to become one of the most unexpected and exciting breakout successes in recent years. This was a lesson in Hollywood's blind spots that were overlooked throughout its production, and a proof that originality can still have an impact on a viewing public accustomed to being spoon-fed the same flavor repeatedly. In fact, they didn't even have a distributor yet. Instead, while they were in an editing studio, they had a startling epiphany, which Stahelski described to Vulture as follows. We were like, oh my god, we killed a puppy. Simple as that. By his own account, Derek Kolstad had written 50 or 60 screenplays before John Wick, which was originally a script titled Scorn. Kolstad moved to Los Angeles to try his hand at screenwriting after graduating from business school and working as a sales consultant. After witnessing several recent vengeance flicks that left him unimpressed, he ultimately received representation, a few credits, and the seed for the idea of John Wick, which he adapted from one of his favorite films, the John Frankenheimer Robert De Niro spy thriller Ronin. In Scorn, Kolstad created a man in his early 70s as the primary character who seeks retribution for killing his 18-year-old dog, the last gift his wife gave him before she passed away. And just an FYI, but the screenwriter swore that body counts in Scorn were maybe 12 people, which is a pretty low number compared to the fatalities in John Wick. Apart from this, some key elements reference the John Wick mythology, such as Continental, the gold coins, and the multitude of assassins. See, making several twists and modifications can make any plot seem like it's an original. Now we have an assassin story that dominates the big screen, and soon, coming into the small screen as well, at least one of its spin-offs will. But back to the John Wick plot, the franchise has avoided giving its title male character a typical origin tale, which has really benefited the show. Keanu Reeves' character entered a new chapter with the release of the first John Wick, a trend-setting movie that was a huge sleeper smash in 2014. Naturally, John Wick's popularity prompted 2 sequels, and John Wick Chapter 4 and a spin-off TV series called The Continental are currently in production. Although the marketing for the John Wick series never concealed John's history as an assassin, the franchise has nonetheless kept John's past a closely guarded secret. The films have avoided giving John any more clear information than is necessary about him, in addition to the fact that his debut took a very different path from an origin narrative. Instead of impeding John's character growth, this has actually been one of the John Wick franchise's greatest qualities. Sure, say whatever you want to say about the storyline, but there's no denying the fact that the John Wick franchise is a sure hit. I mean, even if they have practically the same plot throughout the last 2 movies, and in the upcoming one, even Rotten Tomatoes gave it a pretty consistent rating, with scores of 86% for John Wick, 89% for John Wick Chapter 2, and 89% for John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. All 3 John Wick films have relatively similar Rotten Tomatoes reviews, with a franchise average of 88%. The average rating of each film is greater than the previous, starting at 6.9 out of 10 for John Wick and increasing to 7.4 for John Wick Chapter 2 and 7.5 for John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum, even if the tomato meter score for the second 2 films increases, and they are tied at 89%. It's unusual for a franchise to experience such high levels of review consistency, but even the top critic score has a pattern that is consistent with the ratings from all critics. Even the audience rating, which is typically out of sync with reviewers, is nearly identical for each John Wick film, coming in at 81, 85, and 86% respectively. Like, come on, the numbers aren't lying. The franchise has a total score of 88% from all critics, 82% from the top critics, and 84% from the audience. Naturally, all 3 films have received the certified fresh label from Rotten Tomatoes. It will be interesting to see if John Wick Chapter 4 maintains the same degree of consistency, or if it once again raises the bar with another series high. John Wick Chapter 5 is anticipated to wrap up the series after Chapter 4, because of how unpredictable Rotten Tomatoes can be, and the fact that John Wick Chapter 4 is just 1 review away from earning a worse score than John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. It is unlikely that any of the 5 films would outperform the prior episode. With that, this has been how the John Wick movies are all the same.